Welcome back to Talk the Walk. With me now is Civil Service Secretary Patrick Nip. He's telling us about Hong Kong's latest vaccination program. Thank you very much for being on the show, Mr. Secretary. Now we're just talking about the lowering of vaccination age threshold for the BioNTech vaccine for people aged 12 to 15. I was wondering, China has granted the use of its Sinovac vaccines, which is also used in Hong Kong, to people as young as 3 years old. Is Hong Kong likely to follow China's lead in the near future?
Yeah. Well, in Hong Kong, we have a mechanism to grant the use of vaccines in Hong Kong, just like the use of Sinovac and BioNTech for emergency use in Hong Kong in our vaccination program. There is an advisory panel on COVID-19 vaccines. They will examine the data and put up a recommendation to the Secretary for Food and Health. And according to the law, the Secretary for Food and Health would decide and approve for this use. So we did it for the lowering of the age eligibility for BioNTech from 16 to 12. So as regards Sinovac vaccines, it very much depends on the data and also the application by the drug company, and we will follow the mechanism to examine this.
Okay. Now, will the government heed the request of foreign consulates such as the Philippines and the Nepal to donate unused vaccines to countries in need?
Well, we have purchased 7.5 million doses of Sinovac and 7.5 million doses of BioNTech. So it's sufficient to cover the whole population. We have been liaising with the drug companies very closely regarding the delivery schedule of these vaccines to ensure that we have sufficient supply of vaccines and also minimize the wastage of the vaccines. So as you can see that these vaccines arrive in Hong Kong by batches, and we basically manage the number of vaccines stored in Hong Kong. So we would review the situation, and depending on the vaccination rate, the supply of vaccines, then we would decide on whether there is really surplus of these vaccines. And then in considering how to deal with these so-called surplus vaccines, we would look at the advance purchase agreement signed with the companies, and also there is a mechanism in the World Health Organization for the overall distribution of vaccines to other places. So these are possible options that we could consider. But of course, we will be very careful in examining this, and we would certainly review the take-up rate in the next few weeks and months before we come to a conclusion.
We know that the COVID pandemic, 1.5 years into the pandemic, the Southeast Asia region is still reeling from the outbreak, and there's no end to the pandemic if those outbreaks aren't contained. So at what point specifically will the Hong Kong government said, okay, now it's time that we can lend a hand to other countries like the Philippines or maybe India to help them contain their outbreak so that we can ensure that the variants don't slip into our border in Hong Kong?
Well, of course we would closely monitor the local situation and come to a view on exactly the vaccine supply situation. If there are capacity that we could so-called donate some of the vaccines, I'm sure that we would examine the best way to do so. But at least at present, I think our current situation is that we are adjusting the delivery schedules of these vaccines to Hong Kong. And we all know that for next year or in subsequent years, there may be a need for some sort of a boosters. Now, these are also possible, are the considerations that we will take into account in our discussions with the drug companies. I know that as regards to global pandemic situations, the WHO is performing the role of coordinating and directing our global anti-pandemic efforts, and we certainly would contribute and play our part in supporting that.
Okay, let's talk about the vaccination incentives. We know that businesses nowadays dish out financial and monetary incentives to encourage people to get vaccinated. Is the Hong Kong government still maintaining the position of cash incentives being inappropriate?
You mean cash incentive by the government?
From the government, yes.
Okay. We welcome the private sectors to give the kind of recognitions and encouragements to those who come forward to get the jabs. And it's important for the whole community to work together in this early vaccination for all campaign. So I would pledge my support to them by attending some of their functions and also doing the best in our outreach vaccination service, etc. As regards the role of government, we are taking the lead in introducing the vaccination leave for our civil servants. And we hope that by so doing, that will facilitate the civil servants to have sufficient rest after vaccination. And more importantly, to encourage the private sector and also our statutory organizations to follow. And I'm glad to see the very positive response in following this. And so I think that's the role of the government, by doing our own part and also supporting and encourage the private sector. And I'm glad to see that a lot of new initiatives are very innovative ways of offering these recognitions and encouragements, which is great.
Okay, on the note of civil servants, you've served as Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Secretary before taking up the post last year. What's the biggest challenge you face when serving this administration?
The greatest challenge in the administration, not just for this post or what?
Like throughout your time in this administration?
This is a very good question. The reason I joined the government, and also as a policy secretary, I hope that I want to see the success of one country, two systems. And this is a brand new initiative. We have been doing that for the past 20-odd years. And one important fundamental is to get the understanding of one country, two systems correct, and have a proper perspective about one country as the base and preserving our own systems so that our strength, our advantages could serve not just Hong Kong, but also the whole country. So no matter when I was the Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, or at present as the Civil Service Bureau Secretary, you could see that I'm also pursuing this. For the oath-taking, this is a very good example, because for oath-taking, it is a demonstration and a commitment about this for every civil servant in the political structure of Hong Kong SAR to uphold the basic law and pledge allegiance to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. This is the fundamental to the successful implementation of one country, two systems.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And for those who are watching, I will see you next week right here on Talk the Walk. Stay tuned.